Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The sky tore open. Pulse rounds ripped the ridge. The boom came late, air tearing. Stone crashed behind them. 3rd Platoon dropped into the basin, boots hammering the slope, into open death. Captain Rennick didn't look back. The Draven would be closing the pass within minutes. Precision bastards, always on the beat. Airlocks sealing, orbital comms slicing apart. Standard trap doctrine, copied straight from their Annex playbook. Every move made to pin a fleeing enemy into a natural bowl, then let gravity and fire finish the work. Clean, efficient, repeated 1,000 times across occupied space. But they hadn't trapped civilians this time. They hadn't trapped diplomats. They'd trapped humans, tired, bleeding, pissed off humans, and Rennick had no intention of dying on schedule. He hit the crater floor with a low grunt, scanned the formation. No cover, no overhead, just heat rising off broken slag and the distant gleam of artillery platforms settling on the rim. The kill pit. That's what the maps called it before they got scrubbed. Old mining operation, condemned after the 5th collapse, sealed under 100 meters of fused rock. A kill zone by design, a place you marked as fatal and moved past. But not this time. Rennick pulled his scope up. Rimline movement, precise as expected. The Draven were already forming perimeter locks, lockstep formations, dark carapace armor flashing in the haze, shoulder-mounted relays spinning up. All doctrine, all confidence. He keyed his throat mic. Static. Again. Nothing. They were cut off, just like the Draven wanted. No air support. No orbital eyes. No extraction. Sector 14 Echo was officially closed. Perfect. He turned to the nearest squad lead, Sergeant Vexler, scarred jaw, one eye sealed shut from the canyon blast, and raised a single fist. Vexler didn't speak, didn't nod, just relayed the signal down the line with 2 crisp gestures. Every man locked rifles forward, shovels slung at their sides, charges prepped and packed. They knew what this was. This wasn't retreat. This was a final position. "Keep 'em moving," Rennick said. His voice was low, flat. "Formation Echo 3. Vexler didn't answer, just peeled off to guide the rest. Men moved in silence. Dust hissed around their boots. One by one, they split into assigned wedges and began the descent proper. Not toward cover, but toward the center of the crater, toward the trap. It was massive up close, more a wound than a basin. The walls sloped gently inward at first, then curved into hard drop-offs where old mining equipment had been swallowed years ago. Collapsed scaffolds jutted like ribs from the edges, half fused with slag and rust. Black marks burned into the stone from previous strikes. No signs of vegetation, no signs of life. But the tunnels were still there. Rennick could feel them. Beneath the surface, buried networks of shafts, maintenance ducts, refuel lines, old magnetic rails, a web of forgotten industry. They'd seen the scans before the blackout, knew the tunnels hadn't fully collapsed, just closed over. Old mine maps etched into slate and passed down hand to hand. Not one piece of that data had been shared with command, because this wasn't sanctioned. This was a choice. 3rd Platoon had walked into the trap, eyes open, and now they were going to hold it. No evac, no uplink, no cavalry. Rennick pulled the old transmitter off his belt. Analog, short-range, last resort gear from the core museum bin, and thumbed it to life. A faint green light pulsed. Barely. "This is 3rd Platoon," he said. Calm, controlled, in position. He glanced up once more at the ridge. Draven gunships were moving into holding pattern, casting long shadows through the ash storm. Sensor drones swirled behind them in tight arcs, calculating angles, adjusting fire zones, preparing for the execution phase. They thought it was already over. Rennick stepped on the transmitter and crushed it into the dirt. Going dark. The ash swallowed the words. Wind swept down through the crater mouth, dry and low, whispering across the rock. All around him, his men began unpacking. Charges off shoulders, pickaxes, thermal cutters, data slates etched with old shaft coordinates. The ground here wasn't dead. It was sleeping, and they were going to wake it up. It had been a long war. Too long. Too many retreats dressed as redeployments. Too many comms blackouts passed off as strategy. Rennick had buried too many men to pretend this wasn't what it was. They were out of time. So they'd make time. They would dig. They would hold. And when the Draven came down to finish the job, like they always did, smug and clinical, they'd find a crater full of teeth. The first tunnel opened under fire. Sergeant Vexler's men broke the crust just west of the slag line, a half-buried intake vent from the old fusion drills, still warm to the touch. 2 sappers went in with thermal cutters. 1 didn't come out. Shaft gave way in silence, swallowed him whole, and the dust rolled in behind like breath from a buried lung. No one said a word. Second team widened the breach. No ceremony. No orders beyond hand signs and a grunt from Vexler. They kept digging. They had 37 minutes before the first Draven scouts hit the lower rim, and the charges hadn't even been placed yet. Captain Rennick knelt beside a rust-flaked pipe, cracking open the slate map etched with tunnel routes dating back 90 years. No digital overlays, just old minor glyphs and scratched directional cuts. A third of the paths were marked collapsed, another third unknown. The rest had promise. Half-flooded ventilation shafts, coolant reservoirs, ore lifts long since dead. But depth was on their side. The further down they went, the more the pit became theirs. "Second squad," he said without raising his voice, "dig east. Find vent stack G17. Boots shifted behind him. Movement. Then silence. The wind above the crater ridge had changed, sharper now, less random. That meant altitude drops. The Draven were positioning fast movers. Probable drone sweeps in the next 10. No cover in the open. Anyone above the shaft line would be painted and burned. Below ground, they still had time. Narrow, cold, claustrophobic time. Rennick stood and moved down the incline. The dig lines had taken shape. 4 primary teams, each cutting into their assigned entry point. West vent, east shaft, central maintenance corridor, and a near-vertical ore chute marked unstable in 3 languages. He stopped at the 3rd line. The youngest soldier there, Private Kellen, still bandaged from the canyon run, was wiring a pressure charge with shaking fingers. "You ever use one of those before?" Rennick asked. Kellen looked up, startled. Nodded once. "Simulator." Rennick held his stare. The charge wire slipped. Kellen swore, caught it. "Simulator's not the pit," Rennick said. "You screw the angle. It won't blow. It'll scream." Kellen's hand steadied. He didn't answer. Rennick moved on. At the far end of the central dig, 2 engineers, Kovin and Brannick, were already inside the tunnel mouth, sweat fogging their visors as they mapped depth and angle with hand tools. Brannick was the talker. Kovin was the one who made things not fall on your head. Rennick didn't interrupt them. They were already 3 meters in and working fast. The kill pit swallowed sound. Dust muffled it. Heat dispersed it. The deeper they cut, the quieter it became, a kind of tactical silence that told the Draven nothing. That was the point. Above them, the first enemy drones crested the ridge. Tiny glints at first, no bigger than beetles, but growing in clusters, circling in spiral search grids. Draven doctrine: identify motion, suppress with orbitals, descend with armor. Cold, repeatable, and confident. They still thought the humans were trying to escape. They hadn't seen the wiring. They hadn't seen the map. They hadn't noticed that the sappers were going deeper, not wider, forming choke points, not exits. Every line of retreat was already rigged to blow in 2 directions. The fallback bunkers weren't safe zones. They were burial tubes. "Captain," Vexler said, stepping close, voice low. "West shaft is live. Charges set." "How far in?" 25 meters. Old pump systems intact. We rerouted coolant into the slope. That would buy them heat shielding against drone burners. Not long, but long enough. A scream tore through the air, short, cut off fast. Not one of theirs. Everyone froze. High above, a Draven drone dropped from the sky in spirals, smoke trailing from its belly. It hit the crater wall in a burst of static and dirt, pieces skidding into the dust below. Someone had taken the shot. Rennick turned slowly toward the central ridge. A lone figure stood at the lip, rifle braced, one knee down, smoke curling off the barrel. Unmistakable silhouette. Corporal Sarn, ghosted from 2nd Platoon during the last collapse. No one had seen him in 2 days. Now he was here. "Didn't get the message?" Vexler asked. Rennick shook his head. Maybe he got the point. Sarn stood up, slung his rifle, and dropped into the pit. No cheer, no welcome. He fell in with the rest, like he'd never left. Rennick looked around, dust rising, drones circling wider now. The wind was changing again. That meant ground forces. They'd descend soon, right on time. He raised his hand. "All charges final. No more test runs. If it's buried, it stays buried." Vexler passed the word. Across the pit, the digging slowed. Men began sealing side tunnels, booby traps armed, secondary shafts welded shut, fallback routes rigged. They weren't fortifying. They were shaping the grave. The storm hit 2 hours later. It wasn't rain. Kavros 4 didn't do rain. This was raw static and particulate. Dust thick enough to coat teeth, clog weapons, and choke sensors. Exactly what they needed. The sky vanished. Targeting arrays would blind. Optics would blur. Even Draven masks struggled with full-spectrum ash. That storm turned the kill pit from a trap into a maze. Down in the tunnels, the noise came like a heartbeat. Pressure waves pounding through the rock in deep, rhythmic pulses. Sarn called it the drum. No one argued. Above them, Draven movement increased. Boots struck rim rock. Landing patterns set. Static pulses blinked against the fog. Controlled fire from rangefinders. The first squads were prepping descent. Brannick crawled out of shaft C9, covered in soot. "They're close." "How close?" Rennick asked. 15 minutes, maybe less. Rennick nodded. "Seal this shaft. Use double charges." Brannick hesitated. "What about Kovin?" "He's not coming out." Brannick swallowed whatever he was about to say and went back down. 5 minutes later, the tunnel roared once and collapsed in on itself. No scream, just finality. Private Kellen stood near the east vent, watching it all. "Sir." "Hold your post," Rennick said. He didn't slow down. The last human transmission from the crater went out seconds before full blackout. It was one line, sent blind on every channel the Draven might be listening to. "Come finish it." No signature. No encryption. Just invitation. Then silence. As the first armored Draven squads began their descent, the kill pit showed no resistance. No return fire, no movement. Just dust. Silence. Heat. And the slow hum of power cells warming beneath the ground. They came in twos. Brannick had made it out just in time, face scorched, coughing blood, but standing. Draven shock units, armor glossed and formation perfect, descended through the storm in matched pairs. Precision deployments straight off their playbook. No hesitation. No deviation. They dropped fast through the dust wall, optics scanning, formations locked, weapons tight. Exactly the kind of entry you'd expect for a slaughter. Captain Rennick watched them through the half-collapsed view slit of shaft G17. 30 meters below the crater floor. Dust filtered past the gap like smoke through teeth. He counted 7 pairs so far, 14 total. Probably more coming behind. Good. Let them stack. The pit didn't fire first. That was the key. The Draven doctrine demanded dominance, required provocation to justify escalation. If humans fired first, they'd bring orbital saturation and tunnel burners. But if the enemy entered clean, saw no threat, they'd descend fully, deeper, closer, until it was too late. So the pit stayed quiet. The humans didn't move. The Draven entered, one step at a time. The first contact happened near the east shaft. Private Kellen and 2 others were stationed just inside the shadow of a ruptured support arch, charge triggers in hand, rifles dark. Kellen's breath stuttered in his rebreather. He didn't blink. The Draven walked past them. 8 soldiers, heavy armor, no scouts, no drones. They moved with overconfidence, not recklessness, but ritual. Like this was the closing act of a theater they'd performed before. As soon as the last boot crossed the tripwire zone, Kellen clicked the trigger. A 2-stage pressure mine blew from below. 3 Draven went down instantly, armor cracked, visors blown out. The others turned into overlapping crossfire from behind the arch. Short bursts, no wasted movement. Human rounds punched through weak points behind the knee, just under the neckline. It wasn't elegant. It was anatomy and repetition. When it was done, Kellen exhaled. Hard, fast, too loud. Then another shape moved behind the smoke. The 9th Draven, smaller, almost missed, launched from the ledge behind and tackled him. They slammed into the dust in a flurry of claws and metal. Kellen's rifle spun away, screaming. Flashes of blades and gauntlets. Blood. Human. Brannick reached him first. Didn't shout. Didn't hesitate. Jammed the thermal cutter under the Draven's jaw and triggered full output. The alien thrashed once, then froze, molten metal tearing through its skull. Brannick dragged Kellen back. "He's cut bad," he muttered. Kellen's face was a mess of slashes and bone, but he was breathing. "Leave him in the side shaft," Rennick ordered over comms. "He's earned the dirt nap." Brannick nodded and disappeared into the shadows with him. 10 minutes later, they triggered the first false collapse. Sarn set it off from the central tunnel. Hand-cut wiring, trip plate release, 3 charges tied to a fake fallback bunker. It dropped 10 tons of slag onto an empty shaft mouth, loud, violent, and exactly where the Draven would hear it. As expected, the second wave diverted. They moved to investigate the sound. Same twin formations, same pattern tightness. 2 squads peeled left. 1 held the rim. 1 entered the shaft that wasn't a fallback. The shaft that was shaped to look like one. The shaft Coven had died in. The Draven didn't notice the floor slope, or the missing vents, or the way the shaft narrowed in perfect ratios, just enough to allow entry, not retreat. The last soldier inside realized it a second too late. He turned, tried to signal back, and the walls lit up. 6 shaped charges, 2 per meter, detonated inward. The ceiling folded first, then the walls. The entire tunnel compressed like a lung exhaling stone. Every Draven inside was buried in 5 seconds. The pit held its breath. Nothing moved. Then Vexler's voice. "Target 3 eliminated. Confirmed burial." "Next line," Rennick said. "No pattern breaks. Let them come." 2 hours passed like that. Slow, controlled. Draven units entered. Never many at once. The storm made sure of that. Cut their visibility, disrupted their comms, turned their tactics into pre-recorded drills. They thought they were boxing shadows. In reality, they were feeding themselves into a meat grinder, 1 square at a time. By hour 3, the pit smelled like metal and ozone. Brannick crouched near the base of a tunnel fan, skin gray with dust, watching another pair of Draven disappear into shaft E6. He didn't even signal. The charge timer was already running. They lost a man at hour 4. Sergeant Vexler's second, Halveth, took a round to the chest during a bait retreat maneuver. His armor cracked. He stayed upright long enough to drag the second pack of charges behind him. He looked straight at Vexler before he went, said nothing, and keyed the manual. The detonation took the shaft and both advancing squads. Vexler didn't speak after that, just reset the line. Somewhere near the 5th hour, Rennick stepped into the oldest shaft, the one with the engravings from before the war. He took out a dull combat knife, scraped off the soot from the inner wall, and began carving. The message was simple. You brought this. No one saw him do it. He didn't explain it. But the message would outlive all of them. Outside, the storm began to die. Not end, just soften. Which meant the Draven were nearly ready to commit full scale. Which meant it was time. Rennick checked the detonator harness across his chest. Every line synced, every charge buried, every tunnel rigged. No safeties. He looked up through the dust, saw the shapes forming at the ridge. Draven heavy units. More than a dozen. Maybe more behind. Good. He turned without a word and walked back into the dark. The pit wasn't full yet, but it would be. The ridgeline lit up with pulses. Not artillery, not the clean hum of orbital strikes. This was heavier, longer charges, plasma cord, built for burrowing. The kind of fire meant to bake bunkers from above, boil the ground from the inside out. The Draven weren't testing anymore. They were burning. Captain Rennick watched the sky glow white behind the clouds as the first pulse hit. It wasn't aimed at them, not directly, but 10 clicks south, dust geysered up into the atmosphere in a bloom of light and ash. A warning. The kind you sent just before total descent. Rennick said nothing. Inside the shaft, Vexler stood perfectly still, eyes following the reverberations in the stone. That's siege prep, he muttered. Rennick nodded. They're done waiting. The second pulse came harder, closer. The earth kicked underfoot. Half the tunnel groaned in response, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. Brannick ducked into the junction, coughing. SIG-9 is compromised, he said. 2 support beams cracked. We lost half the fallback packs. Pull out? No time, we're sealing it now. He was already gone again, back into the collapsing dark. A minute later, the shaft collapsed with a low, wet crunch. Stone on steel. Above, the storm had thinned into vapor. Draven gunships hovered just beneath cloud cover, low, deliberate, scanning. Infantry pods dropped in sequence around the rim, not squads, not pairs, formations. Tight, symmetrical, armored, dozens. And behind them, something larger. A figure stepped off the lead carrier, black-armored, slow-moving, broad across the shoulders. Taller than the others. No ceremonial markings, no dramatic entrance. Just presence. The Draven commander had arrived. He did not speak. He pointed, and the assault began. The first wave hit the west tunnel. 8 soldiers, heavy suits, tunnel burners in hand, shoulder-mounted rigs that spat white flame and high-density plasma streams. The leading unit moved slow, cautious, scanning the dust, still underestimating. They reached the first corner. Rennick triggered the wall vent. The redirected coolant, siphoned hours earlier by Vexler's team, vented into the corridor at 40 Celsius. It didn't kill the Draven. That wasn't the point. It primed them. Then the charge blew, and the corridor flash-boiled. Armor cracked. One Draven shrieked as superheated pressure found a seam. 2 more dropped, limbs locked in seizure. The last tried to fire the burner, too slow. The backblast cooked him mid-pivot. Vexler gave a single signal from cover. Reset! The next wave dropped down the crater wall without support fire. Trusting their doctrine, trusting the scan data, trusting history. They should have trusted the dirt. Tunnel E3 collapsed beneath their boots. not from explosives, from weight. Brannick had warned the walls were soft in that sector, and the engineers hadn't reinforced it. Not by mistake. By design. The ridge cracked open and swallowed 7 of them alive. One tried to climb out. Rennick shot him in the face from 30 meters. In the south shaft, Corporal Sarn moved alone, rifle low, back to the tunnel wall. The pressure was building, not just tactically, but physically. The deeper they went, the hotter it got. Ventilation was nearly zero. Their rebreathers were clocking overtime, sweat flooding visors, breath coming shallow. Sarn didn't care. He watched the next pair of Draven try to outflank, saw them split, one moving high, one low, just like in training. Predictable. Perfect. He waited. The low one passed beneath him. Sarn dropped from the overhead pipe and buried his knife in the soft neck seam. No sound. No warning. The other turned. Too late. Sarn fired once, not to kill, but to slow, then closed the distance and finished it with the butt of his rifle. Blood sprayed against the shaft wall. He leaned there for a moment, breathing, then disappeared into the dark. Third Squad's position buckled at hour 6. The heat from the orbital pulses cracked 2 support anchors in Tunnel G6. The collapse was sudden, vertical. 5 men went down. 2 made it back. 1 screamed for help. Vexler went in for the extraction. He came out with a boot and a burned helmet. No one asked questions. The line reformed, tightened, closed ranks. No shift in discipline, no cracks in cohesion. Just scars. Rennick moved through the central access shaft, checking sync lines. The detonation harness showed green across every fallback. Charges were live. Tunnels were layered. Collapse ready in sequence. They had no more fallback positions, because there was nowhere left to fall. And they weren't planning to. Brannick met him near the main vent chamber, holding a schematic slate. "We rerouted the remaining vents through the surface intakes," he said. "We can flood the entire upper network with compressed exhaust. Superheated. Risk? Breaches, cave-ins. How soon? 10 minutes, max." Rennick nodded. "Do it." Brannick ran. Above, the Draven commander signaled the final assault. He stepped to the crater's edge, looked down. What he saw was a still crater. Quiet. Smoking. Partially collapsed. No human movement. A victory already halfway written. He descended, and his army followed. Below, Rennick stood in the heart of the pit. No radio, no backup. Just the sound of charges humming in the stone. Vexler stepped up beside him. "They're all coming down." Rennick didn't look at him. "Let them." They came down like floodwater, formation after formation, heavy boots and burn rigs, swarming the basin with mechanical precision. Dust peeled from the crater floor. Sensors blinked through static. The Draven saw no resistance, no bodies, no movement. They believed they had broken the humans. They believed wrong. Captain Rennick watched from 30 meters underground, standing in the center of the lowest rigged junction. Around him, the last 6 survivors of 3rd Platoon moved with deliberate speed, checking lines, sinking detonators, double-wrapping charges around old support columns. Every tunnel was wired, every fallback sealed. The ceiling above them was thick with charge markers. Shaft by shaft, the pit had been lured full. Now it was time to close it. Above, the Draven spread. Their commander led from the center, unflinching, methodical. He moved without weapon drawn, surrounded by armored units fanning outward through the dust. Their formation was clinical. Every step locked in historical rhythm. They didn't know they were walking on bones. They didn't know the kill lines weren't defensive. They were shaped. In Tunnel F2, Brannick sealed the last vault door. The room beyond it was packed with thermobaric remnants, repurposed mining fuel, rusted ignition rods, powdered stabilizer mixed into the dust itself. Everything Coven had mapped, everything they'd buried deeper instead of wider. Brannick slapped the igniter patch. Red light. He turned once toward the narrow crawlspace that led back to the spine. "Lit!" he called. Vexler's voice crackled back through the line. "Fall in!" Private Kellen lay unconscious, bandaged and still bleeding, in a pocket shaft off the main line. No one spoke. No one disturbed him. Sarn crouched in the intake corridor, waiting for movement. He didn't wait long. 2 Draven passed beneath him, stepping over old railings. He didn't shoot. He stood up behind them instead, rifle reversed, and crushed the first with a single blow. The second turned just in time to catch the blade. No words, no sound. The Draven bled the same as they all did. Sarn left them in the dark. Rennick moved to the core junction. A single metal plate had been bolted to the old tunnel wall. Under flickering light, it read, "This was ours." He ran a hand over the surface once, then keyed the final command sequence into the detonator. Charges flashed green. Vexler appeared beside him. His face was blank, covered in soot. "We still holding?" Rennick didn't answer. He watched the synced lines finish their final loop on the slate. Every tunnel was now linked. East to west, floor to ridge. Explosives primed. Atmosphere vents reversed. Pressure zones rising. Brannick's voice came through the line. "Thermobarics ready." "On your mark," Vexler said quietly. Rennick didn't give it. Not yet. He turned back toward the ceiling, feeling, not hearing, the weight above them. The enemy was here, fully committed. Hundreds now, maybe more. Good. He keyed the master channel. Above, Draven squads swept the crater floor. Some knelt to scan. Others marked entry points. One team gathered near the last known human fallback, marking the zone for a controlled burn. Their commander stood on an outcrop, visor scanning. Then, finally, the pit spoke. A single human signal burst from the ground, uncoded, cracked and faint, but audible. "We told you not to follow." Then the world broke. Tunnel F2 went first. The thermobaric payloads ignited in a single, gutting flash, not outward, but inward. The mining shafts collapsed on a vacuum front, sucking in stone, heat, air, and bodies. The Draven standing above it didn't scream. There wasn't time. Their armor folded, their lungs crushed. The crater wall above them shattered like cracked bone and slid inward. Then the second layer blew. Tunnel E6, then D4, then G17. Explosions sequenced like thunder. The stone didn't erupt, it folded, pulled inward by rigged detonations and collapsing supports. Mining shafts sank into themselves. Debris swallowed Draven squads whole. The floor they stood on became the ceiling of their tomb. Sarn sprinted through the smoke, dragging date cord behind him. One more fuse to light. One more dead end rigged as a piston chamber. He slammed the wire into the charge node, spun, and ran. The corridor blew behind him, compressing into a tunnel of fire. His back lit up with heat, but he didn't fall. Didn't stop. In the core junction, Rennick watched the dust raining from the ceiling, thicker now, louder. Stone cracked. Air hissed from vents as they ruptured. Superheated gas blew through every open channel. The oxygen lines caught fire and screamed. Vexler grabbed Kellen's unconscious body and slung him over his shoulder. "We're pulling now," he said. Rennick nodded. He keyed the final relay. Deep shaft, D0. The deepest. Detonation confirmed. Then he turned and followed the rest into the last evac route, a maintenance crawl that hadn't seen light in 40 years. Behind them, the pit collapsed like a folding lung. Ridges crumbled inward. The rim line dropped. What was once a battlefield became a sinkhole of corpses, heat, and dust. The Draven had brought numbers, doctrine, discipline. The humans brought soil, and it swallowed everything. Far above, a single Draven unit, cut off from comms, caught on the outer rim, sent a final pulse transmission. Requesting extraction. Emergency fallback. Situation reversed. Requesting. It cut off mid-signal. No answer came. The crawlspace held no light, just heat. Claustrophobic, radiating from the stone like an aftershock. The walls bled warmth from the detonations, and the air stank of metal, old lubricant, and something that might have once been bone. No one spoke. Captain Rennick led from the front, dragging one arm against the wall to feel direction. His rebreather hissed slow and steady. Behind him, Sergeant Vexler moved silent, carrying Kellen over his shoulder. Brannick brought up the rear, limping, slate in hand, eyes on the scanner that barely functioned. Above them, the world was gone. The crater had folded inward, sealing every surface route, every shaft, every tunnel. The Draven were buried, not surrendered. Buried. And that was the win. The evac tunnel was real, mapped by Coven, confirmed by Brannick, ignored by the Draven. It had once been a ventilation channel cut for ore exhaust back when Kavros 4 still mattered to someone with a ledger. Now it was half collapsed and lined with ash. But it led out. 6 clicks underground, angled northwest, threading under the surface like a scar. They crawled for an hour, then 2. No words, just breath and heat and the slow grind of gear against stone. Eventually, the tunnel widened. A blast door sat ahead, tilted on a broken hinge. Brannick reached it first, jamming a pry rig between the seam. The metal groaned, reluctant to live again. Then it shifted. Light filtered in, pale, weak, still tinted with ash. But light? Rennick stepped through first, weapon raised. The exit chamber was dead, just an old loading bay built into the hillside, long since abandoned. No enemies, no movement, no sign of anything living. He turned back to the others. "We're out." They emerged one by one, filthy, half-broken, silent. Vexler laid Kellen down on a supply crate. The kid was breathing, still out cold, still bleeding, but he'd made it. Brannick slumped against the wall, eyes shut, slate still in hand. Sarn appeared last, rifle still slung, face unreadable. He looked around the bay once, then walked to the far wall and sat down. Rennick stepped outside. The air was clearer here, cold, dry, thin. The sky above was beginning to show hints of blue through the receding ash layer. Somewhere out there, Draven signals would still be trying to confirm what had happened. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Command would be wondering if 3rd Platoon had ever existed. He knelt in the dirt and began driving a spike into the ground. It was crude, forged from the mounting bracket of a date harness. But it stood straight. He pulled the last piece of slate from his pouch, cracked, soot-covered, and wedged it onto the spike. No words, no emblem, just a mark. Let them dig if they wanted. They wouldn't like what they found. Hours passed. No Draven, no signals, just wind and silence. Eventually, the portable relay Brannick rigged blinked once, a pulse connection. Weak, narrow band, but functional. Rennick leaned over and keyed the transmission. "3rd Platoon," he said. Voice like stone. "Kill pit sealed. Extraction route confirmed. Send coordinates to fleet. One-time burst follows." He uploaded the only file Brannick had saved from the last helmet cam still functional. Just footage. No edits. Dirt, fire, tunnels collapsing, bodies falling. He hit send, then turned it off. They stayed there until the dropship came. Black hull, cold burners, no insignia. Just a metal bird sent by someone in orbit who didn't ask questions. Rennick boarded last. Didn't speak. He just sat, watching the crater disappear behind them in a slow rise of dust.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.